Okay, I found the research paper that I was talking about. That is here. I'll put it in the chat. Let me just share my screen so you can see what it is. So we go over here. It's pretty old. So from April 2009. It's in the journal Computers and Education. And the title of the paper is iTunes University and the Classroom, Can Podcasts Replace Professors? I think that's kind of a false dichotomy in the title there from my perspective, because who makes the podcasts? Professors, right? So maybe it should be retitled, Can Podcasts Help Professors? Anyway, let's read the abstract. iTunes University, a website with downloadable educational podcasts, can provide students the opportunity to obtain professors' lectures when students are unable to attend class or when there's a global pandemic. To determine the, I'm adding my own words here, of course, as you can read here. Let's see if I can just zoom in and if you can all see this as well. All right. The reason I have such affection for this particular paper was, well, it was one of the first papers on this topic that I can think of. If I'm wrong, please correct me. And the other thing is that this is from my alma mater, State University of New York at Fredonia. So, all right, let's continue. To determine the effectiveness of audio lectures in higher education, undergraduate general psychology students, which I was at Fredonia in the year 2001. I was in a general psychology or intro to psychology class when 9/11 happened. I remember going to that class right after the second tower was hit, because I think my class was like at 9:30 or something, and nobody in the class knew what was happening. Nobody had turned on the news that was there in the classroom. The professor, who I think her name was Hawkins, maybe Deborah Hawkins. I could be wrong on her first name. I remember just standing up in the middle of class and saying, Professor Hawkins, do you understand that, we just were attacked by terrorists in New York City? I think we should leave. And she said something like, I didn't know about that. I'll check into that. I mean, this was before the age of smartphones. And, but no, we didn't leave. We just stayed there. And then I remember walking out and just hearing people sobbing and crying, walking the halls. Where was I? Can't remember where that class was. But anyway, then I walked to the Williams Center to really see. And they had giant televisions broadcasting the live coverage of the Twin Towers. Anyway. And then, in the same department, the psychology department of the State University of New York, in the years following that, because I was a freshman, every year I came back and was part of a study studying flashbulb memory as it related to 9/11. Interesting, that you've heard of that idea of flashbulb memory, that people, you remember certain events from history, really well because of their significance. So, what were you doing when JFK was assassinated? It's something that my mom would reminisce and talk about all the time. And, basically the theory behind flashbulb memory is that, supposedly you remember the fine details, like exactly what you were doing. Now, whether the science really holds on that is up in the air a little bit. I think that the result of this flashbulb study that I was part of about 9/11 was that people think that they remember fine details in great detail and better than other memories, but in actuality, they don't remember these flashbulb events. I mean, they remember the flashbulb events, but their personal perspective memories aren't as good as they claim they are. And I found that to be true about myself. Like when I went to recall specific details of 9/11, I found myself going to Wikipedia looking them up a lot. Whereas, who knows if my memories of what I actually was doing are super accurate. I think I do know that where I was in my dorm room, and I was brushing my teeth. Actually, I wasn't even in the dorm room. I was in the bathroom, and I was near the bathroom, and my dorm room was next to the bathroom. And I was brushing my teeth, and I heard these two maintenance men that were fixing a toilet in our communal bathroom there talking about from at that time, it was only one plane, and so everybody thought it was an accident. So they were talking about a small plane hitting one of the Twin Towers. And then I took those guys, because we were all concerned about what was happening, into my dorm room, and we turned on my little TV, and we saw the second plane hit. I think, see, I can't even remember the details particularly myself. Anyway, huge digression, remembering 9/11, where you were, what you were doing. Anyway, that links back to the psychology department at the State University of New York at Fredonia, which is where this now relevant paper on how pre-recorded lectures might help people learn a little better are. Sorry, I'm all over the place. This is just a test run to see how this works. So thanks for being with me. All right, so in a lecture condition, participants listened to a 25-minute lecture given in person by a professor using PowerPoint slides. Copies of the slides were given to aid note-taking. In the podcast condition, participants received a podcast of the same lecture along with PowerPoint handouts. Participants in both conditions were instructed to keep a running log of study time and activities used in preparing for an exam. 1 week from the initial session, students returned to take an exam on the lecture content. Results indicated that students in the podcast condition who took notes while listening to the podcast scored significantly higher than the lecture condition. The impact of mobile learning on classroom performance is discussed. All right, so that's just the abstract, but it kind of lays out. And I think one of the important takeaways here for me is that in either case, taking notes is important. So, you know, in one of the sessions that I took in this professional development course at the beginning of the semester, the session was basically like a course design clinic where we worked on techniques, and it was really cool. I think her name's Danielle Lusk. I could be wrong on her name. She's from our Center for Teaching Excellence and TELOS, which is Technology Learning. Ooh, I forgot the rest of that acronym. Anyway, she told us and had us do an exercise where we were really processing information. So we had to sit down with a blank piece of paper and with no notes, no internet, no nothing, just think about what the front of a dollar bill looks like and then try to draw it, try to really draw it. And then, you know, do the same for the back. Then we compared notes with each other and tried to come up with a, you know, overall picture of what a dollar bill looked like without actually looking at one. Then, you know, she brought up images of a dollar bill and we looked at it. And, you know, that was supposed to be an illustration. It was a great illustration of processing information rather than just like passively, you know, trying to absorb it. And so I think, you know, the main point here to me is that even while watching these lectures, you know, actively sitting and taking notes, here I'm going to say some things that are maybe sound kind of controversial, but they're really not. So oftentimes when we think about teaching and learning, people talk about modes of learning. Some people are auditory learners. Some people are kinesthetic learners. Some people are, you know, like to take notes. That might be true in terms of your preferences, but in terms of actual studies on this stuff, taking notes works for everybody. So that's part of processing information. And so there really is not solid science on this whole modes of learning thing. I can find some papers to back that up, but essentially, if you think that you sitting there not taking notes of any kind and just listening to a lecture is going to help you learn the material, the science shows that that's wrong, that you know, you have to engage in some way, usually, you know, taking notes, however that is. You know, you could be drawing pictures if that's what you want to do, but just sitting back and listening to it is not going to help you remember the material as much as, you know, listening and writing at the same time. So I think that's a big point that can be taken out of this, is even if you are engaged in a lecture online, that writing notes while you watch it is really important. All right, I'm going to stop this now. I'll let you all kind of read this paper yourself. All right, thanks for bearing with me.